First, we have Aloha West out of Maryland, ridden by Jose Ortiz and trained by Wayne Catalano. Second place in the Stolkinian Phoenix Stakes Grade 2 at Keeneland. And then first place in the allowance optional claiming race at Saratoga, and then a first place in another allowance optional claiming race at Saratoga. Broken 110 on the E-Speed figure in the past two races. But one thing I do have a little bit concerned about for Aloha West is the consistency over his entire career. We have a fifth place, we have a fourth place race somewhere in there, and only $271,000 brought in. 2021 is the only year that Aloha West has been racing, and so maybe a good horse for the future. But I am a little apprehensive about Aloha West given the experience level of this horse. Pretty good most recent races, second place and first place and first place. Pretty overall a decent horse, but there's a lot of competition in this race. So I'm going to have to say Aloha West is my seventh selection for this one. Next up, we have CZ Rocket out of Florida, ridden by Florent Giroux, trained by Peter Miller. $600,000 in 2021 and $1.4 million in CZ Rocket's career. A gelding foaled in 2014, one of the oldest horses I've seen in a race coming up. And you have third place at the Santa Anita Sprint Championship Stakes Grade 2 at Santa Anita. Only third place there, and then a second place and a third place before that at the Bing Crosby Stakes and the Pat O'Brien Stakes, respectively. So you haven't won a race since, it looks like, April 10th at Oaklawn Park, but a little bit of experience running in Southern California. You got two races ran in the past 3 months at Del Mar, which is pretty good to see. $600,000 on the earnings gives it a little bit of a bump in a higher level of competition for this horse, and CZ Rocket had been very consistent in about going from 2020 into early 2021 before falling off a little bit in the summertime. So this horse is certainly capable of a lot. Middle of the pack is what I'm going to say, fourth place for CZ Rocket. Dr. Schivel was a pretty incredible horse to have in this race, ridden by Flavien Prat and trained by Mark Glatt. $339,000 brought in 2021. That's on the lower side compared to some of the other horses, but the consistency that this horse has is absolutely incredible. Ever since the maiden special weight victory on August 8th, 2020, Dr. Schivel has won every single race since then, posting over 100 on the E-Speed figure 3 times in a row, and only hasn't done that 3 times in his career out of his 7 starts. So you have a win at the Run Happy Del Mar Futurity. That was all the way last year, but still, that was at Del Mar, and that was against a pretty good crop of horses. Then you have allowance optional claiming, a winner of the Bing Crosby Stakes on July 31st, and then battling back to win with a 112 E-Speed figure at Santa Anita, the Santa Anita Sprint Championship Stakes Grade 2 race. That was a pretty big race with a lot of horses that you might see in this one. So Dr. Schivel, a pretty consistent record. Maybe could have faced some better horses. You got an allowance optional claiming sprinkled in there. So I would say for Dr. Schivel, third place. Next, we got Firenze Fire. Firenze Fire, 6 starts in 2021, $473,000 brought in this year, $2.7 million in his career in 37 starts dating back to June 2017. Most recently, second place in the Vosburg Stakes Grade 2 race, and then before that, Grade 1 4-Go Stakes at Saratoga, and broke 100 on the E-Speed figure every single time since Belmont Park in 2020 last year. And a little bit inconsistent going into the later summer months. You had the second place, fifth place, second place. But in the middle of the summer, you kind of had in May and June in the Run Happy Stakes and True North Stakes, you got a back-to-back victories. So Firenze Fire certainly is capable of winning some races, but has kind of been not running the best, and still had some Grade 2 races, hasn't been able to win those. So Firenze Fire is going to be middle of the pack. I'm thinking 6th place for Firenze Fire. Next, we got Following Sea out of Kentucky, ridden by John Velasquez and trained by Todd Pletcher. $513,000 in 2021, and this horse has only raced in 2021, starting off in Santa Anita in March and with the maiden special weight. Soon won the maiden special weight, moving up to allowance, winning first place there, second place in the Haskell Stakes, and third place in the Alan Jerkins Memorial Stakes, and first place in the Vosburg most recently. Those are all some pretty big races, especially the Haskell Stakes, running against the likes of Mandaloon and Hot Rod Charlie in that one. So for Following Sea, you have 6 starts, 3 wins, so that's about half of the starts, a good amount of earnings in some pretty big races like the Haskell Stakes, and then a pretty good race most recently in the Vosburg Stakes. So Following Sea is going to be my 5th selection for this one. Jackie's Warrior is the next colt in this race. $1 million brought in this year, 6 starts, 4 first-place finishes, trained by Steve Asmussen and ridden by Joel Rosario. Most recently, in the Gallant Bob Stakes Grade 2 race at Parks, we had first place at a 1-9 odds, and then before that, first place in the Alan Jerkins Memorial at Saratoga, and before that, first place in the Amsterdam Stakes at Saratoga. Second place in the Woody Stevens Stakes, and then first place in the Pat Day Mile on May 1st at Churchill Downs. So we had 2 E-Speed figures over 100 in a row. At the Allen Jerkins, you have 119 in that one. 3 first place wins in a row. Jackie's Warrior is incredibly consistent. Won his first 4 races of his career, and he's pretty impressive. So I'm going to say Jackie's Warrior is my favorite to win the sprint for the Breeders' Cup. Jackie's Warrior first place. Lexitonian is out of Kentucky, ridden by Jose Lezcano and trained by Jack Sisterson. You have $328,000 brought in this year. 5 starts, but only 1 first place finish, only 1 second place finish. Most recently, 8th place in the Forgo Stakes at Saratoga on August 28th. That's a terrible performance. Really inconsistent running from this horse. You had 6th place in the Met Mile at Belmont Park and 1st place in the Alfred Vanderbilt Handicap. That's probably the reason this horse is running in this race. That was an impressive finish, I must say. 2nd place in the Churchill Downs Stakes on May 1st. So, Lexitonian can run really well, ran really well in the Alfred Vanderbilt Handicap at Saratoga, but is incredibly inconsistent. The 8th place most recently is a pretty bad. That's not the kind of level of racing we want to see from horses in the Breeders' Cup Sprint race. And then 6th place in the Met Mile is also not impressive. So $328,000 this year, a little bit on the lower end compared to some other horses. Lexitonian is going to be my 8th selection for this one. Matera Sky is out of Japan, most recently ran in 5th place at the Cluster Cup at Morioka, and then 12th place in Dubai at the Meidan Racecourse, 2nd place at the King Abdul Aziz Racecourse, 2nd place in Japan before that. So, has run pretty well in some of the Dubai or Saudi Arabia races, not the one at Meidan Racecourse, but in the past had previously run well in those ones. Ran the Breeders' Cup Sprint at Santa Anita 2 years ago, came in 8th place in that race. $310,000 brought in this year, but $3 million in his career, so he's pretty experienced, but most recently hasn't run terrific, not ultra consistent. Won the Cluster Cup last year, but came in 5th place in that one this year. So it seems like the success of this horse has kind of passed a little bit. And then 8th place in the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year, or 2 years ago, that's not very impressive at all. So Matera Sky is going to be my 9th selection for this race, coming in last place. Now for the second best horse in the race, Special Reserve out of Kentucky, foaled in 2016, ridden by Red Ortiz Jr. and trained by Michael Maker. $517,000 brought in this year. 5 first place finishes in 7 starts this calendar year, and most recently 1st place at the Stolkeen Ogden Phoenix Stakes, and that was at Keeneland with a 112 E-Speed figure. And right before that, 2nd place in the Alfred Vanderbilt Handicap, right behind another horse that's going to be in this race. Won the Iowa Sprint Stakes and won the Maryland Sprint Match Series Stakes at Pimlico on the weekend of the Preakness Stakes. So, has been pretty consistent in his last probably about 7 races, winning 5 of them, coming in 2nd place twice, so never worse than 2nd place in those ones. Hasn't recorded a E-Speed figure lower than 100 since December 11th, 2020 at Remington Park in an allowance race. So Special Reserve is a fairly consistent horse in the grade 1s and the grade 2s, high-level horses. This horse does well. So Special Reserve is my 2nd selection for the Breeders' Cup Sprint race.